Last week, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke at the Freedom House 2023 annual awards ceremony where he said some pretty alarming things. His focus was on technology and how it can either further human rights or enable repression. Here with us now to fill us in on some of the alarming things Blinken said is Kyle Anzalone. He's the opinion editor of antiwar.com and news editor at the Libertarian Institute. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Kim.
So fill us in on from going over his speech, he said a lot of alarming things, a lot of the things that we typically are kind of afraid of, where one side believes that we need to be in control of the technology because we are the ones with the right opinions. We're the ones with the right viewpoints. And so we need to censor other people. And he said this throughout his speech, but you pointed out a very alarming aspect that had to do with the use of AI. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, so the whole speech, like you said, there's quite a few alarming things that he says about is consistent for our Secretary of State. But this was at the Freedom House 2023 annual award ceremony. But the very concerning thing he said was Russia continues to push a steady, relentless stream of disinformation about its war of aggression against Ukraine to lie about and cover up horrific abuses it commits to try to justify committing others. In response, the State Department has developed an AI enabled online Ukraine content aggregator to collect verifiable Russian disinformation and then share it with partners around the world. And so it sounds like they have an AI tool, and somehow they're going to get data from all these different websites and social media posts, run through their aggregator, decide what's disinformation, and then give it to their partners. Not sure who those partners are, but my guess is
Right.
it's probably the intelligence community officials that are in place at a lot of these social media companies.
So he says that the US, our government, has developed an AI enabled online Ukraine content aggregator. So what do you think that even means, right? So he's a little vague in his speech. He's just kind of announcing, yeah, we've done this. But does this mean that Ukrainians are going to be able to say that's Russian disinformation? Because it says it's a Ukraine content aggregator to collect verified Russian disinformation. So who gets to do, the AI is only as good as the person that programs it, right? So if the programmer says, well, if Ukraine sites are pointing this out as disinformation, then flag it. I mean, how do you think this is even going to play out?
So my guess is that this is probably going to be controlled in Washington and with the NATO alliance, and not so much in Kiev. Just that's where the power lies in our world today. Ukrainians, from the perspective of Washington, make good cannon fodder for the war, but I don't think they really get to call all the shots here. So, yeah, I guess like there is a if you go to NATO's website, there's a page that you could see where they debunk the claims that NATO expansion provoked Russia to go to war in Ukraine. And so my guess is that that's what those kind of things are what they're going to use to look to say that for a post that people put out that say uh, Ukraine, looking to add Ukraine into the NATO alliance is what ended up causing the Russia to invade Ukraine, and then they're going to have some way of relaying that to Twitter and Facebook and others, and then asking I'm sure those companies to either add like a little note to the post or fact check it or just simply delete it. And one of my concerns here is that, like you said, it's probably not going to work well right away. This is a government developed AI tool, but if it gets more effective over time, it could slowly eat away at the voice of people who are going against the imperial narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only as good as whoever programs it. So, with any AI, if you're a crazy fascist dictator, you could essentially program your AI to make sure that no dissent against you is out there, that people only see and read good thoughts about you, right? And so when we're living in this, I think a government that is a warmongery government that goes around and wreaks havoc around the world, we're not allowed to express that opinion now without that. With this AI, it's going to be saying we're flagging that. So rather than an individual, like what we saw during the pandemic, individuals going and flagging COVID misinformation that ended up not being COVID misinformation, right? A lot of it ended up being accurate information. Now the government is saying they're going to use AI tools to go around and flag what they deem, and that's the important thing to understand. It's what they deem to be misinformation, what they deem to be disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, right? Because malinformation, and this is where they really try to screw us over, malinformation, they say, is not even wrong. You know, it could be truthful, but it's just meant to cause like bad thoughts. so
Yeah.
um yeah, they could say, well, maybe you're not wrong, but you know, you're stoking the flames, and that's going to be problematic for us, and so we don't want you to be spreading this information. This is really frightening. This is frightening that they're, you know, this is kind of like the Biden administration developed the Ministry of Truth. I don't even know what did they really call that, with that woman, you know, neat.
Disinformation Governance Board.
Yeah, yeah, right,
Disinformation
exactly.
Governance Board with Nina Jankowicz.
Yes. Okay. So and then that, obviously the public outcry was so strong they got rid of it. So now it sounds like they've developed AI to do that very thing instead.
Yeah. And it seems like this will be even worse because with, as you point out before, people reporting the post, that's problematic. But it means that somebody has to have a significant number of friends or followers to probably get reported enough to get flagged. Where with this AI content tool, they could just look at all the posts regardless of how many friends are. So there, it's a far more sweeping censorship. And very ironically, in Blinken's speech, probably 15, 20 seconds after he announced this Ukraine content aggregator, he said, AI runs the risk of strengthening autocratic governments, including by enabling them to exploit social media and even more effectively manipulate their people and sow division among and within their adversaries. So, the Secretary of State agrees with you. This is a threat.
Right. As he says, but we're going to use it. But don't worry, we're not one of those autocratic governments. We're not the ones shoving misinformation down your throat, trying to get you to behave in unison. And anybody who's against it, we're going to smear and call conspiracy theorists and label No, that's not us. Right. We're not that government. We're the good guys. We're the good guys. So it's okay for us to use the AI, just not these other autocratic governments. This is outrageous. It looks like he also talked about a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. What does that even mean? Say that in October, the White House put out a blueprint for AI bill. He's saying this in his speech. Some basic principles to try to guide the way that we design and use automated systems in ways that protect our people and defend our democratic values. These include the principle that people should be protected from unsafe and ineffective AI, and that people should know when an automated system is being used and understand how it affects them. What is unsafe and ineffective AI that people need to be protected from? Sounds like what they're developing might be that very thing.
Yeah, it sounds like the US government really wants to have a big role in how AI is developed and rolled out. And this is a way for them to basically label any kind of AI they don't like as problematic. Oh, it's unsafe. It doesn't work up to our standards. And then they just get to dismiss it.
One thing I also want to point out about his speech, was he winning an award, by the way? Was he winning an award for freedom? Wouldn't that be Wouldn't that be ironic? Antony Blinken, who's one of the main minds behind West Exec Advisors with Michelle Flournoy, and they have been very much at the forefront of shaping the over the horizon style warfare that they're trying to move the United States into. Drone warfare is what they want to kind of move the US into, which they successfully did in Afghanistan. Um, so he talks about surveillance technology, particularly spyware, he says that digital lives make us vulnerable to new forms of surveillance tech embedded in devices we carry in our pockets, we wear on our wrists, we have in our homes. So he says that the government, he says that this is why, with surveillance technology being able to be utilized in an atrocious way, we have mobilized a government-wide effort to try and shape how surveillance technology is used. We've been putting significant restrictions on the export of technologies and inputs used for surveillance and other malicious cyber activities by governments. We added spyware companies that we have enabled the misuse of their technology to something called the Commerce Department's Entity List, which prevents these companies from receiving products or components from our own firms without the approval of our government. Um, and he says we continue to identify and sanction foreign companies that develop and supply software and other surveillance technology to governments with a record of using these tools to abuse human rights. I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah,
Um,
so I mean, one really interesting part to all of this is that what he has to be referring to there is the ISO group's Pegasus spyware. That's this no-click spyware where they send you a message and then could infiltrate your phone and delete the message before you even click on anything. That's how advanced this spyware was, and it was sold to governments around the world that use this to spy on their own citizens, spy on journalists, spy on American officials and uh the US gives you Israel so much money every year in defense aid and just gifts to billions of dollars to spend on their military. And so if the US was really interested in cracking down on this, you think they would be cracking down on the Israelis, but rather, Blinken, along with Joe Biden, are some of the most committed American politicians to Tel Aviv.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, this is, I don't know. I'm really curious what you think about this, Kyle, but we are entering a tough era, right? With AI development, with all of this software. There's definitely no doubt that technology is an amazing thing, fascinating thing. It's really helpful in our lives, but at the same time, it can be used, as Blinken points out, by governments for nefarious purposes, even though he then says, but we're developing it, so don't worry. I think a big question is who should be regulating? Because on one hand, we don't really want the government to do it because of the reasons we just pointed out. But at the same time, I don't know if I want companies doing it because I don't know if I trust guys like Bill Gates, for example, who has a firm grasp on a lot of the AI at the moment. But I know you're a libertarian, so I guess I'm going to guess what you go ahead and tell me. What do you think? What's the best way to
I
curb
mean,
the abuse that may happen?
I think you're absolutely right to be skeptical, especially today. The billionaire class, they're not really the private sector. They're just the best people at getting government welfare. And so, these aren't the best people that we have, people who are subject to the market. They're subject to, making sure that they bribe the right politicians to keep the contracts coming to their companies. So,
Hmm.
yeah, this is really troubling. I don't have solutions. I'm more of a foreign policy guy than a tech guy. So I don't know how big the AI threat is. I remember when I was a little kid and my pants were scared off by Y2K. And of course, nothing happened there. So I do like to remember that. But this AI thing seems like a real, something that we will have to navigate and in some way as a culture, as a society, put some kind of limits on what we are allowing AI to do.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind an I guess, misinformation style program if it was limited to just showing me when something's a deep fake. Because it's easy to get duped by the deep fake stuff where it looks like you're really, I got duped myself on YouTube. I was watching who I thought was Keanu Reeves doing really funny things every day. He'd put out these videos and it was him kind of just living life and being really cool and funny, and then I found out, oh, it's a deep fake. And I thought, oh my gosh, that looks so real. I mean, it looks like Keanu Reeves doing these things, dancing around, making funny videos, and it's not. And then there was another one with Tom Cruise, which I didn't see. I'd read about it and then looked it up and was like, wow, this is amazing. So I wouldn't mind if there was some sort of technology out there that would at least tell me this is a deep fake. This is not your celebrity doing this thing. And that, and especially with deep fakes can get really dangerous where it looks like, because a lot of us, we rely on what we hear, what we see in order to report facts.
Mhm.
We read things, we read opinions, we read, it's like, okay, I need to see it for myself. I want to see it for myself. And then you see it for yourself and you say, okay, this really happened. But deep fakes change all of that. That makes it so much more difficult to navigate what's real. And maybe an AI tool in that way would help. But again, it all comes down to, then that could, of course, still, everything could be abused. There's no doubt about that. But we do have to have some, that's where it gets tricky, right? Because we have to, where do we draw the, where do we trust? Where do we choose to trust? Who do we choose to trust? I think is when it
Yeah.
gets tricky with this tech stuff.
I would love a little browser extension. I would even pay money for it if it, it detected AI in images and videos and stuff like that. So hopefully
Hmm.
something like that gets developed soon because we definitely need it. As somebody who tries to, cover news from what I find online, you're right.
Right.
This is terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to, while I have you, and you are a foreign policy guy, I do want to talk about this new coalition that was the Netherlands and the UK came out agreeing to an international coalition to help Ukraine procure F-16 jets. This was after Zelensky went on his European tour, and after which European countries were saying that they would do what they could, if they could, to help Ukraine get fighter jets. UK said that they were going to help train their pilots, and other countries came out saying, "Yeah, we want to," or even citizens from other countries were saying, "Yes, we would love to give you F-16s." Poland, I think Brussels, there were a few other nations that came out saying we would like to do this. And I'm thinking, as I'm reading all of this, like, who gave them the right to give American fighter jets to Ukraine? What are your thoughts on that with this potential coalition? Now, the US is maybe going to block it, and I'll get to that. But this original idea that these other countries, I think the question is, we as Americans and as NATO and the main force in NATO had been supplying training and weapons to all of these other countries. And now we get to a situation where these other countries are saying, yeah, we'll give you some of these weapons that we got from the United States. I mean, shouldn't we have a larger discussion as a country as to where our weapons are going? Should they even be, in my opinion, no other nation should be allowed to use US weapons. Only the US should be able to allow to use US weapons. They would have to manufacture their own weapons. I don't What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that's not a bad idea. I'm all for curbing weapon sales as much as absolutely possible. This has long been a problem. I've talked about the wars in the Middle East, American weapons going to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, falling into the hands of terrorist groups all over the Middle East. Americans don't care where their weapons go. Now, I think when you're talking on nation state levels, typically the U.S. writes into the contract that because we sold you this weapons platform, then you have to get our approval before you sell it or give it away. But at the same time, I'm worried the US might be on board with this. I've thought since about December that the US was going to end up giving F-16s to Ukraine, and in parts because they start giving them tanks. But also, the US and UK in recent months have agreed to start exploring training Ukrainian pilots, which I think means they're just training a limited number of Ukrainian pilots, and they won't
Hmm.
spend the time to train Ukrainian pilots on F-16s unless they are going to give them F-16s. I believe just this week we found out that France is going to start participating in that. So I actually thought they were going to do this a little bit more quietly and then be like, hey, we're giving them the F-16s. And oh, by the way, the pilots are already trained. I do believe it takes, what, a year? Maybe if they accelerated 6 to 9 months to train pilots on F-16. So I still guess we're several months away before these warplanes are actually hitting the battlefield.
Yeah, and the New York Times came out with an update on this today, and they said that an unnamed Ukrainian official did say that four nations, including the Netherlands and the UK and Norway, have quietly signaled that they're ready to supply Ukraine with F-16s. Lockheed Martin built F-16s, which is crazy. But an American official told the New York Times that the administration is sticking to the stance that they're not sending their own F-16s to Kiev. And you're right; the New York Times did report that the United States would have to give approval for the providing of training to F-16 fighter jets. That the only training they can get without U.S. approval is like lessons on technical language and tactical training on the ground is all that they could potentially get. Um, so, but the question, which you're posing a great one, is, at what point would the administration change their mind on that and say,
Right.
okay, if they are going to start training these pilots and kind of getting them ready, it is in preparation that the US would say, okay, fine, it's time to give them some fighter jets. And it sounds like these nations are betting on that. That's what it sounds like.
Right.
And that would change the war. I mean, what do you think would happen if Ukraine got F-16 fighter jets?
Uh, it's very concerning, Kim. We can't say for sure. The Russians' position, as clear as it's been, has been the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov, said that they're going to take as much territory as they need to secure what they feel they need to secure, and then that's going to get grow that territorial grow based on how long of range of weapons the West gives to Ukraine. And so, just this week or last week, the UK first supplying the Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine, which add another 50, 60 miles to the total range of weapons that the U.S. has, are and the U.S. and our partners have given Ukraine. That means Russia's apparently going to take more territory. So I would think F-16s would be quite significant. And then also, you would expect Russia to step up missile barrages and attacks on all kind
Yeah.
of infrastructure in Ukraine.
Yeah, it would definitely be an escalation. So let's hope we don't end up there. Kyle, thank you so much for joining the show. Kyle Anzalone, opinion editor of antiwarnews.com and news editor at the Libertarian Institute. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Well, if you struggle to get a good night's sleep, if you're dealing with too much stress and could use a little calm in your life, if you suffer with pain and discomfort, especially after physical exercise, and if you're frustrated with a health concern that's just not getting better, then try CBD. CBDistillery.com is a great source. They have over 2 million satisfied customers with a wide range of excellent, high quality products. 90% of customers reported that they sleep better with CBD. 81% said CBD helps with stress. 80% said CBD helps with aches and pain after physical activity. So get on the right path. You can use my code to get 20% off at cbdistillery.com. Just use the promo code Kim. So just my name when you're checking out, and you're going to get 20% off your products. And they've got a lot of really great products. I personally got the one for sleep. I also got one for my dog. I've got an aging dog. She's an 11-year-old shepherd, and she's got some aches and pains. You could tell when she's walking around. So a lot of great reviews. People swear by CBD. And CB Distillery is a really great resource, high quality products, lots of different products, lots of variety there. So again, visit cbdistillery.com. Use my name, Kim, at checkout and get 20% off.